opportunity to get their questions in. If we're not able to answer your questions in this session, or if you still have more follow-ups, feel free to contact either Crystal or me after this briefing. Please be aware also that this session is being recorded, and we will make it available on request when it's ready to share, likely later today or tomorrow. At this point, I'd like to give Director Bushatsky an opportunity to make some opening remarks, followed by Mr. Cook. We'll then open up for your questions as fielded by Crystal. So thank you, Director. I'll give it to you.
Thanks, Doug. So in the interest of saving time, I just wanted to make sure that everyone has seen the joint DWR-CAP press statement. That's probably as good an opening statement as I could possibly make. But I know that potentially General Manager Cook wants to maybe start off with a few comments about how the cuts that are coming in Tier 2A might impact the Central Arizona Project water users. So I'll let Ted go down that path for a bit, and then we can get right into the Q&A.
Ted, you're muted.
I said I'd be brief in the interest of time. I didn't include the time. I was just silent. There was some early reporting that was a little bit confusing, so I'd like to correct a little bit of that. In what the Bureau of Reclamation announced earlier today was that Lake Mead would be in a Tier 2A. So this is between elevations of 1045 and 1050 in Lake Mead, and the related reduction to Arizona is 592,000 acre feet. That is 80,000 acre feet higher than the reduction that we took in are taking in 2022 of Tier 1 of 512,000 acre feet. There was some reporting that made it sound like those two amounts together were what we were doing this year, but it is just the 592. That 592,000 acre feet is what Arizona is to take under the drought contingency plan and the 2007 guidelines. It is not the amount that is being applied toward the 2 to 4 million acre feet that the Commissioner of Reclamation had asked that the lower basin address. Briefly, how that will be applied in Arizona is similarly to the other reductions we have taken for the past 3 years under DCP. CAP takes all but a tiny portion of this whole amount. CAP users, it goes in reverse priority order. And last year under Tier 1, this year in Tier 1, 2022, our CAP agricultural pool was completely eliminated, and the non-Indian ag or NIA priority pool, which is just senior to them, was reduced by about 2/3. However, as part of the Arizona DCP, there's a mitigation program, and the NIA pool was restored to 100%, and the ag pool received about 1/3 of its supply. This year, going into 2023 in Tier 2A, both the ag pool and the NIA pool will be reduced to 0 prior to mitigation. The NIA pool may receive mitigation up to 75%. The important thing to remember here is that after the NIA pool and reductions in future years, we'll be getting into potentially our higher priority Indian and municipal and industrial supplies. So I would just leave it at that. We have great graphics that you can find on our website or get from our communications people.
Okay, so now we can start into questions. I'm going to start with those that have raised hands. For those of you who joined after Doug finished his opening remarks, I will summarize that if you have a question to ask, please use the raised hand function and we will get to you. So I would like to start with Jim Carlton, please, from the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, hello. This is for Tom and Ted, I guess. You guys are doing more than anybody in terms of cuts on the river. And in fact, Tom, you and Ted both put out a statement today saying Arizona has already done it. Has carried a disproportionate burden, and it's not fair that really others haven't as much. Do you want to name names of who is not doing enough, or or if you don't want to name names in general, where would you like to see more cut and where along the river, lower basin or upper basin? Maybe.
Well, I'll start, and I guess I'll start with the lower basin. And regardless of what they are doing or not doing currently, the most water in the lower basin is in California. And the most water for agricultural use is coming out of California. We need California to participate with us. We can't do this alone with just Arizona and Nevada. Nevada only has 300,000 acre feet of use, and they're probably down around 240 right now in actual use. So the bulk of the water really available to us is going to come from Arizona and California. I don't want to leave Mexico out of that equation. They have cuts to take, I believe, in Tier 2A of 104,000 acre feet, but I count them among our collaborators who need to do more to achieve the goals set out by the commissioner. In the upper basin, I think their 5-point plan, I guess, is at this point in its early stages. I would like to see numbers attached to their 5-point plan. They quite haven't done that yet, but I think there's an ability for the upper basin to cut their use as well. Their use is a little bit more variable than ours from year to year because they are less reliant on reservoir storage and more reliant on what actually comes to them down their tributaries and rivers on an annual basis. And I'll stop there and let Ted add if he'd like to.
I will just add one other comment to everything that Tom said. Any discussion among the basin states and Mexico about taking additional reductions, as the commissioner has asked us to do, has to consider our starting point. And our starting point is for 2023 in Tier 2A, as we just discussed, where Arizona is almost taking 600,000 acre feet. Mexico is taking 104,000 acre feet. Nevada is taking 25,000 acre feet, and California is taking none. So we probably won't get into numbers about who said what as far as additional reductions. And Arizona is not asking anyone to catch up to where Arizona is, but certainly moving forward from where we're at in Tier 2A to take additional reductions, we at least expect people to keep up with what Arizona is doing, and that has not been able to come together at this point. That's the basis of Tom's comments and my comments of Arizona is willing to do our part, but only if other folks do it with us. We can't be continue to be the one who's doing most.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay, next, I would like to call on Luke Runyon from KUNC.
Hi, Luke Runyon here from KUNC. In your statement, you said that Arizona and Nevada had put together a proposal that would have achieved the 2 million acre feet. And I'm wondering if you could go into in detail where those cuts came from and who rejected it.
So Luke, I'll say several things. One, as our statement also said, we want to continue to work with all the folks in the lower basin in Mexico to try to continue to move something forward that we might get to collaboratively rather than having the feds act. So I don't want to really get into specific numbers, but we did take the liberty of assigning numbers in that proposal to California, Nevada, Arizona, and Mexico. And in total, it would have gotten close to the 2 million acre feet. Mexico was not in that room. I will tell you that right now unequivocally. Those discussions really occurred between the federal government and Mexico with some participation by the states. So I don't think there's a lot of value in trying to get specifically to what was in that proposal or what numbers were discussed, because the numbers throughout the process of the negotiations kind of fluctuated up and down on all three sides, so to speak, California, Nevada, and Arizona as we talked. So I think the collective is what we're looking here at, because again, it's not really possible for any one state to bear that whole burden all by themselves. Ted, you got anything to add?
Yeah, just a little bit. And I agree with Tom that we'll stay away from the actual numbers. But in aggregate, the plan was or the proposal from Arizona and Nevada was, as it said in our statement, a way to get an additional 2 million acre feet of reduced consumption in the lower basin plus Mexico. And that would be on top of tier 3. So you can do the math. You can take the tier 3 numbers and reduce that by a further 2 million acre feet, and you could see how we would reduce from 9 million acre feet between the lower basin and Mexico. That's the cumulative apportionment down to just over 5.6 million acre feet among those 3 states and Mexico. It wasn't completely, the way that we got to the numbers that we did discuss wasn't completely proportional to the apportionments, but it was very similar to that. So you could take 2 million and divide it into the 9 million, and you can get a good idea about what additional cuts each entity would have to take to get to that 2 million acre feet. The parties in the room was the United States and the 3 lower basin states. As Tom stated, Mexico was not there. Nevada and Arizona were basically the makers of the proposal. So you can figure out for yourselves who was not comfortable with moving forward on that basis.
And it was Reclamation that rejected the proposal?
Well, Arizona and Nevada suggested the proposal, and the other 2 parties in the room were not comfortable with moving forward on that basis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next hand raised was Courtney Holmes with ABC 15.
Hi there. So during the briefing today, Reclamation was, well, first of all, I think there was an expectation today that Reclamation was going to come out after all their like big talk in June that, if you guys don't cut it, then we'll step in, et cetera, and really didn't. So when I say that, it sounded like they were optimistic about all the things that the states are talking about. But Nevada puts out a letter saying that exactly nothing has happened. You all put out a letter today saying we can't bear the brunt of everything. How far apart are you all on this? Because it sounds like Reclamation sees, rainbows and cotton candy, and you guys are like, this is not working out.
So I'll start, and I was never a big fan of Skittles in the first place, but regardless, it's not just about the numbers on their face in terms of who might do what, but one of the big issues was we had an expectation in Arizona, and we're working after June 14th toward an outcome in which the reductions would be enforceable, mandatory, whatever words you want to use, so that we had certainty the reductions would actually be completed. And you probably heard today in Reclamation's comments, Interior's comments, about a lot of voluntary agreements. Well, that doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for Arizona. If we're going to put water on the table, given all we've done under the guidelines, under the DCP, and additional conservation efforts since 2014, we want to see an outcome in which there is 100% certainty that whatever the numbers are that are put out there, those numbers are the numbers that are going to actually happen. And we're not going to rely on voluntary programs that create a level of uncertainty for which we don't even know if the volumes of water attached to those programs are going to come to fruition. So that was maybe as big an issue as anything in terms of where we headed. And it wasn't long into the process, maybe 3 or 4 weeks into the process from June 14th, where it became apparent that for whatever the reasons, folks started looking at more of a voluntary program than a mandatory program. And we had a particular challenge in Arizona, as we did with the drought contingency plan, that any agreements that I sign on to on behalf of the state to bind the state to things like additional reductions, for example, I need the state legislature's concurrent resolution of approval. And we were really going down a path of a similar outcome to the May 3rd Assistant Secretary Trujillo letter, in which the feds, and there were letters that led up to that from the states to the feds back and forth, but that it was a federal action taking place that was going to make the actions in that May 3rd letter kind of enforceable. And we were going down that path, and that kind of changed a little bit and made it even more difficult to come to a conclusion in which Arizona saw the certainty it is seeking in terms of these reductions and the certainty we want to see to protect the system.
So Tom is correct that the issues that Arizona has with the progress that has been made so far is not just about the numbers. It's partly about the numbers, and in aggregate, what has been discussed in recent weeks and days is not close enough in our mind to the bottom of the commissioner's range of 2 to 4 million acre feet. It's not a big enough number yet. And that being said, even with that small number, as Tom said, it's voluntary. It doesn't have the certainty that we would like. We thought Arizona did a great job as part of 500 plus, but that was a voluntary program. And as you saw from the numbers that Reclamation presented today, we have not met the goals of that voluntary program. We can't do that, have that kind of experience again. There are a couple of other factors that play in here too, that Tom did not mention, but associated with a voluntary program is the expectation of compensation. And this has always been a part of these voluntary programs that we've done. That's what helps it to be a success. However, the vast quantities of water that we need to do and the worsening conditions of the reservoirs has led to some unreasonable price expectations of what people were willing to be paid or are asking to be paid. This is something that we probably can resolve with some more work. But even with the $4 billion that's recently been legislated and I think signed today by the president, we are not in a position, the entire Colorado River Basin, to consume a large portion of that. And I don't think that's what the intent of Congress was, just to pay people 1 year at a time to not take their water. This is something that would need to be repeated every single year until you're out of money and potentially out of water. We can't do that. So much of that funding needs to go toward more durable solutions, even some things that might have lasting or even permanent impacts, not just a year at a time. So when you combine all of those factors together, it's not enough. It's voluntary. It doesn't have the certainty that we need. It's going to be too expensive. And last but not least is that we don't know what is going to happen yet. And this gets back to what is the United States' plan on the actions that they will take to get to the number that we collectively need to get to. And at this point, that's not clear to us.
Okay, next question. We have Kathleen Ronayne from the AP.
Hi there. Thanks for having this call. I have a quick logistical question and then more of a political one. So the logistical one is, are you expecting that both of the ag pools will get mitigation or only the NIA pool? And then the second question is, so I'm California based. I've had a lot of conversations with MWD specifically, IID, others. You know, what they tell me is that California is at the table. They're negotiating in good faith. Someone at MWD had told me that, you know, all 4 entities in California are willing to give either water or money to come up with some kind of deal. So are they telling the truth? Has California put anything on the table? And if so, why isn't it enough?
So first, it's only non-any agricultural water that's going to tribes and cities, essentially, that's being mitigated for. There were some more details that the state put money on the table for the agricultural water users for some infrastructure improvements, but that's not really per se the mitigation we're talking about moving forward. So I will say, in regard to your question about California, I absolutely believe they are negotiating in good faith. They have put resources on the table. As we said before, we don't think they were enough. We don't think they were enough in relation to what Arizona is expected to contribute based on the guidelines, the DCP, and these additional cuts. And I do think that there are opportunities to continue to negotiate and potentially get to a place where we have more certainty, bigger numbers in total, and perhaps California comes further along with Arizona and the others, Nevada and Mexico, to a place where we can get to a state's deal the way the commissioner had hoped, I guess, or asked for on June 14th. I think there's been a tremendous amount of resources put into the process by all of us, including by California. Things work a little differently in Arizona than they do in California in terms of who's at the table. And the individual contractors in California, there are only 5, versus in Arizona, when you include CAP, it's like 85 or 86. And I pretty much represent everyone, and Ted represents the CAP, who's probably the single biggest contractor for Colorado River water. So that's always a little bit of a different paradigm in terms of the negotiating strategy. But we have internal processes to check back, so to speak, with our stakeholders to get their feedback that kind of flows out of the process Ted and I led to deliver the drought contingency plan here in Arizona in 2018 and 2019. Ted, anything else?
Yeah, and thanks for answering the question, Tom, about the mitigation. The only thing that I would add to what Tom said, and I agree with him, that the California parties are definitely working with us in good faith. I don't think that they're messing around with us or being disingenuous at all. This is very hard work, and a lot of time and effort has been put into it. I think we are on the right path with California as far as maybe being able at some point to get to some numbers that would work for us, but without those missing elements of a certain program that wasn't based just on volunteering, knowing what was going to happen next, and having the United States willing to have a backstop and say, here's what we will do, that any numbers that we could come up just between Arizona and California was not going to be sufficient. And so it wasn't just the numbers, as we said before, it was these other considerations that did not materialize in the way that Arizona needed them to be able to agree to any set of numbers between California and Arizona. We were making progress, but not in the context in which numbers were being discussed. It wasn't going to work.
Okay, next, Kathleen, I see the question you put in the chat. She's asking, can you share a breakdown of where the extra 80,000 acre feet are coming from?
It's going to be reductions to the non-Indian ag pool, non-Indian ag priority pool. So this includes some Indian tribes and some cities.
Kathleen, I could follow up with you after this call if you want more specifics. The next question we have is from Laura Court.
Hi, Laura Cordy from Politico here. Thank you so much for taking our questions. There's a lot of talk today about wanting to continue cooperation, both from the states and the lower basin and the feds. What does that timeline look like now? Is there a hard deadline we're looking at to land on a negotiation deal?
So I'll start. I don't think they have, no one's thrown out a hard deadline, but the water users, at least in Arizona, start putting in their water orders for next calendar year around the 1st of October. And that's a little bit different for the non-tribal versus the tribal. I know in Mexico, they have more closely to December to put their water order in. So folks are starting to need to know what they're going to have next year. I think that might be as much of a deadline as anything. But also, if we don't act in 2023 and Mother Nature doesn't bail us out, which none of us are counting on, because that's a hope, not a plan, what we might have to do in 2024 is going to even be exponentially greater and more difficult to do. So part of the issue in terms of getting to a final deal is we don't want Arizona does not want just a 1-year deal. we don't want just a 2023 deal, and we'll worry about 2024 when 2024 comes or second half of 2023 comes. Given all that Arizona has done in the past and the disproportionate amount of water we've put on the table, we want to see more clarity about what's going to happen in the out years, 2024 certainly, but also 2025 and 2026. And again, that was another piece of the puzzle we haven't been able to complete. We've been focused mostly on the near term 2023, but there are elements for us that need to occur in the outer years. So time's a wasting. We need to know what's going on. It would be pretty tough if you're an agricultural user and you've got crops in the ground in 2023 and someone comes along and says, sorry, even though you haven't reached harvest, we're taking away your water. So everyone needs to have the certainty, the same certainty we're looking for the reductions. People who are going to have water to use need the certainty that they're going to have it throughout the calendar year 2023. I'll stop there.
Yeah. So I will add to what Tom said, that while we do not have a deadline for the ongoing conversations about what type of protection volume plan we can come up with for 2023, we will, as we have all said, continue to be working together towards a plan. I might mention here, and because Tom mentioned, water orders for CAP users have to be submitted by October 1st. That's for non-tribal water users. The tribes have a little bit longer to do that because it comes through reclamation. And so next week on the 24th, we have, on August 24th, we have a water users forum where we will be discussing these matters and what our plans for 2023 are. Even if, however, and Tom said time's a wasting, and it is, every day that goes by is one less day that we can be doing whatever it is that we need to be doing. But even if we don't have a plan by October 1st, or even if we don't have a plan by December 31st of this year, does not mean necessarily that we're going to stop. I hope that we don't just give up and say, well, 2023 is a lost cause, and let's take a few months off and then we'll come back and discuss what we're going to do in 2024. Even if it takes us till February or March or April to come up with a plan for 2023, that we still have those many more months in 2023 to do something different. A part of 2023 is better than none at all. So this is why we will keep working on it, and it probably will be something like everything else on the Colorado River for us. One thing leads to another. So we will work on 2023 until it's time to start working on 2024, and the one thing will meld into the following thing. I think we're all hopeful that the plan that we can come up for 2023 will have some of these durable elements that are part of that, so that we're not starting from zero every single year as we work on the forward years of 24, 5, and 6.
Okay, next we have Jeremy Duda with Axios.
Hi. Obviously, there's been a lot of kind of disappointment and frustration with Bureau of Reclamation over not making any decisions on that 2 million to 4 million acre feet. But it sounds like there's also
Jeremy, we lost you.
can you hear me now?
You're kind of cutting in and out a little bit.
Okay. How about now?
That sounds good.
Now, do you guys feel like the upper basin states have been negotiating in good faith? It seems like there's a lot of frustration with their kind of unwillingness to make some cuts, since the Bureau of Reclamation made that announcement in June.
So Jeremy, I'll start, and I made a statement to it. I believe the Arizona Republic when the 5-point plan was transmitted to the commissioner, and it was, I give them a grade of incomplete because there's no certain actions yet in their plan and no volumes of water attached. I think they continue to work to that place, and I think they're looking for more certainty from the lower basin as well in relation to selling what their plan to their constituents. So something that often gets lost in our discussions is Ted and I are not kings in Arizona, and our counterparts in the other state are not kings. We can't wave our scepter and make people do a lot. We need their support. And so one of the challenges that we all have among the basin state leaders for the states is trying to help each other with our constituents to sell the deal. So they want to see more certainty out of the lower basin. We haven't achieved that goal. We want to see some more numbers and certainty out of them. And it's really kind of an iterative process. The closer we get, the more they'll do, the closer we'll get. And that's kind of how these discussions have been going in the past and will continue to move on into the future. And about the feds, in the mid-2000s, when the guidelines were being worked on, Secretary Norton had to give a nudge to the states. Some might call it a kick in the pants. In the drought contingency plan process, Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner Brenda Berman likewise had to give us a little bit of a nudge or a kick in the pants as well, in various places and venues, threatened the federal action. So that lever from the federal government is really important to keep people moving forward. And I think, like a lot of collaborative deals, we were trying to deal with hard issues, or you're settling difficult opposing views. At the end of the day, the equation often is, am I better off with the deal, or am I better off with someone imposing a deal on me? And the threat of the imposing a deal on me often gets you to closure when you have to make that tough decision.
I'll just add a couple of comments to what Tom said as far as the upper basin goes. And I agree with Tom that their plan is incomplete. It's a lot less than we would like to see them do. But to be fair, what the lower basin has done is a lot less than what the upper basin would like to see us do. So it's not exactly a waiting game. Well, we'll show you ours when you show us your type of thing. Frankly, as disappointed as we might be, I don't really blame them. I'm not making an excuse for them or allowing that to be an excuse for them. But the more of the uses is in the lower basin. We have more work to do here, and we have not done what we need to do yet. So for the time being, I can understand why they're sitting pat with the plan that they have.
Okay, next question with Arizona Capital Times, Nick Phillips.
Hi, folks. Thanks for taking a moment to answer questions today. I want to, in a way, follow up on, Tom, what you were talking about, that the threat of having some cuts imposed can get you to a deal. Can you tell me, has the Bureau of Reclamation given any details or maybe even sketched an outline of what kind of cuts they would be inclined to impose if it gets to that point?
I probably cannot exactly accurately repeat what the federal government said in their press conference this morning, but they definitely talked about starting to look at administrative processes that would allow them to do several things. One, protect the system if it starts falling below 1025. They weren't very specific on what those would be. And then they talked about, again, those administrative processes, looking at redefining what beneficial use is in the lower basin, and also potentially counting evaporation and system losses. So the beneficial use is about efficiency of use, and what level of efficiency then attends to an actual beneficial use of the water. It could also be the crop types and other things. And some agriculture is very efficient. In Arizona, our Colorado River guys in the Yuma area have become really efficient because of market forces in central Arizona, although they've lost their Colorado River water. We have mandatory state law that made them become efficient. There are different efficiencies in agriculture throughout the basin. The evaporation system and system losses is also a very important point. And so anyone that uses water in the lower basin, they get a certain amount of water delivered, they put it to use, and let's just say they divert 1,000 acre feet at their head gate, right? For whatever the use is. What it takes to get that 1,000 acre feet to their head gate might be an additional 10 to 15%. Those are just example numbers, because you've got evaporation in Lake Mead, in Lake Havasu, and Lake Mojave. You have evapotranspiration in the river as the water flows downstream all the way to the Mexican border. And every single water user contributes, when they use water, to the system declining, because no evaporation and losses are accounted for in the lower basin. That's an artifact of the decree in Arizona v. California, where they decided that every state's apportionment, 2.8 million for Arizona, was consumptive use out of the main stem. And so that is an issue that has created somewhat of a structural deficit, so to speak, in terms of the water use in the lower basin. And I believe that's where the federal government is going when they talk about evaporation system and losses. We don't know exactly how that would be implemented. There's probably several different ways that impact different entities differently. So, but I applaud the fact that they have announced they're working towards that. I will be honest with you, we have talked with them about that since very nearly after the commissioner testified in June, on June 14th. We even had discussed sitting down with them from lawyer to lawyer kind of prospect to get into more details about how things would be implemented and what their authorities might be to actually create those outcomes. So it is a very important aspect of this process moving forward.
Okay, we are going to take a couple of more questions. Nicole Garcia, I don't know what outlet you're with, Nicole, so if you could please identify that as well.
Hi, sorry, Nicole Garcia with Fox 10 News here in Phoenix. And I apologize if you've already answered this question. I joined about a minute late, but why is it that Arizona shoulders the majority of the burden of cuts and California practically zero?
So I know Ted will want to weigh in. So back in 1968, when the Colorado River Basin Project Act that authorized CAP and also authorized building of some additional reservoirs up in the upper basin, when that legislation was passed in Congress, those water users who have post 1968, that was the date of the act, water rights in Arizona, at least, were considered to be junior to all of the other pre-1968 rights, including all of the uses in California. There was a quid pro quo, however, in that legislation in which reclamation was supposed to look at augmenting the flow of the Colorado River by 1.5 million acre feet, which has never happened. So the risk to Arizona, because that never happened, has increased exponentially. There are definitely different views about when this junior priority kicks in for the state of Arizona. There's language in the act that talks about 7.5 million acre feet being available for use in the lower basin, and the junior priority, so to speak, doesn't kick in till then. We believe that is on the basis of 7.5 million acre feet in the entire river system, which there's way more than that right now, even though the volumes keep declining. But because of that junior priority threat, Arizona in the 2007 guidelines, Arizona in the DCP, agreed, so to speak, to take the bulk of the reductions comparatively. But we can't do any more. We're already taking the bulk, and the 2 to 4 million we're looking at now, you can argue whether it's drought, it's probably more climate change. I don't believe that in 1968 an outcome was being predicted that the river was going to be permanently flowing way less than it was with the historical record up through 1968. And so in a way, the burden of that junior priority falls on Arizona because of climate change, not because of drought, not because of short-term drought. And is that an equitable outcome? Is that what was intended by Congress in 1968? I don't believe so. And the last point is, as we said before, even if that junior priority kicks in, Arizona's CAP, which in full years is around 1.5 million acre feet a year, just in 2022, it's probably about 700,000 acre feet because of the cuts and conservation we're doing. Even if you put CAP to zero, you're not solving the problem. You're throwing good water after bad, so to speak. Use a cliche about money. So I'll stop there, and Ted might want to add some views.
Just a little bit, but mostly along the same line. So the 2007 guidelines in particular, and to a lesser extent in the drought contingency plan, Arizona does take more than everybody else, and that is not because of the junior priority per se, but because of the risk of the junior priority being invoked at some point in time. So that's kind of a technical distinction there, and neither Tom nor I are here to make legal arguments about the junior priority and so forth. As unfair or lopsided as that might seem, that's the deal that was made. We're doing our duty. We're taking our reductions, but like Tom said, a lot of the focus seems to be on Arizona's junior priority and CAP's junior priority, specifically, without all of the other things that surrounded that, as far as augmentation that has not happened, and a lot of other things. And what we believe is the intent of the legislation is a occasional situation due to a dry period or something like that, where water would have to be cut in a priority order, not something that Arizona and CAP would have to bear year after year ad infinitum, and potentially being cut to zero when there are millions of people in Arizona that rely on that supply. It's just not.
Just to clarify, because I'm not familiar what the junior priority is, but just like if you can sum up in a one sentence layman's terms, it sounds like because of legislation that was passed both in 1968 and 2007, Arizona has agreed to take the burden of the cuts. Is that accurate? As basically
Not completely. So let's start with the 1968 Act. As Tom said, the 1968 Act, the Basin Canyon Project Act, which authorized the construction of CAP, part of the political compromise to get that legislation through Congress was that contractors, including CAP, that received their water on or after the date of that legislation of September 30th, 1968, would have a lower priority for Colorado River use than everybody who was before that. So the big contractors in California had earlier contract dates, so they have priority. And the language in the statute specifically says that until California receives its 4.4 million acre feet, CAP is not allowed to divert any water once the junior priority is in play. And as Tom described that, we believe that that's when the reservoirs have even less water than they do right now. What the 2007 guidelines reflects is, and I was not involved. CAP was, but I wasn't personally involved when that happened, so I don't know all of the details. But the agreements that were made as part of the 2007 guidelines reflects the risk, the higher level of risk that CAP as a junior priority might have in the future, and so CAP's contribution to avoiding that situation in the future was much higher, if that makes any sense.
So, Nicole, I know you're looking for a soundbite, so let me try to give you one from my perspective. And it's this: the specter of the junior priority has resulted in Arizona acting aggressively to conserve water for the benefit of the system, because that is the best option to keep water flowing to all of Arizona.
Okay, and Nicole, if you would like to fact check, I'm happy to do that after this call, because we're running short on time, and I want to allow for one more question. Ellen Nielsen, if you'd like to ask, and also identify your outlet, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you guys so much for holding this call. Ellen Nilsson, I cover climate with CNN. I wanted to ask you guys if you've already been very generous in describing some of this stuff, so thank you. I wanted to just ask you, as far as the position of the Bureau of Reclamation in some of these negotiations, if you could just sort of describe like how they've approached these negotiations, if they have if they've basically taken more of a passive approach, letting the states try to hammer this out. But it also sounds like, you know, they and California rejected the proposal that you guys put forth. So I'm just sort of trying to understand their position in all of this, since it seems like you guys don't really know when an upcoming deadline might be, or even really what the Bureau's plan is going forward. So if you could just sort of give me a little bit more of an idea of how they've been in negotiations and sort of the questions even that you have for them going forward. Thank you so much.
So I'll start, and I will say, as they did in the 2007 guideline discussions, and as they did in the job contingency plan discussions, they acted in several manners. And one, as a technical resource, the modeling data, the factual data to help everyone understand the risks and why we need to do these things, which is very important to get people to understand why we need to act and why they need to be part of that action. Second, they've been acting as a facilitator, trying to bring the two sides together with a lot of facilitation within the room, but also kind of shuttle diplomacy, separate discussions with different groups in Arizona, California, and elsewhere, and then trying to bring the parties back together. And then lastly, you know, they have talked with us about resources, and we know that now they have $4 billion. They had money under the bipartisan infrastructure bill as well, because resources coming to bear for things like infrastructure, maybe some temporary or a combination of temporary and long-term benefits of compensated conservation. So I think those are the main ways that they have been active, and they have been very active, to their credit. They spent a lot of FTE hours. They've done a lot of traveling, as we all have. So I don't know if Ted would want to add anything to that, but that's my view of how they've attempted to and actually participated in the process.
Right. They have not been passive by any means. They have been very active, as Tom said. There are a couple of folks, I won't mention names because then that reflects maybe not so highly on some other folks, that have been crisscrossing the country on the phone with parties every single day, trying to work things out. But the approach that the United States has been taking is trying to facilitate, let's say, voluntary offers, cajole the states to doing what the states ultimately need to do, rather than getting out the stick. So it's been more of a carrot approach than a stick approach from the United States. They are leading, and maybe in hindsight is 2020. We can look back and say, well, maybe more stick and less carrot would have worked better, and maybe we can all learn from that.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may. I mean, do you guys, just given how dire things are with the Colorado River Basin, I mean, do you guys think that there needs to be more of a stick approach from the Bureau at this point?
So I will say the short answer is yes. I said it earlier, we need the threat of action by the federal government to get to a place where the results of that action are harder to live with in each state and among all of our water users, to get us to understand that a deal that we can put together among the water users and the states, while imperfect, might still be better than what might be imposed upon us. And that comes to the fore in so many things that we work on in the water world, when we have to try to put together agreements that address really difficult issues with very large impacts.
So we were very encouraged by the details that the United States provided in their statements today with the specifics that were referred to earlier this afternoon in our event right now about application of VVAP and losses and looking at a more stringent definition of what constitutes appropriate beneficial use. Those are the types of things and that type of specificity that is so important to us. And we would encourage and do encourage the United States to move forward as expeditiously as they can to get to that point where they can define what they will do and when they will be able to do it. The sooner, the better.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Ted and Tom, for providing that. If you've got any further questions, you can email them to either Crystal or me. And as mentioned before, the press statement that we produce is available now on the ADWR website. I think it may be in CAP as well. And that this event has been recorded and will make it available to anyone on request. So thanks again. Thanks for coming, and we'll continue. Thank you.